He who writes in blood and aphorisms does not want to be read. He wants to be learned by heart. And in the mountains the shortest route is from peak to peak, but for that you must have long legs. Aphorisms should be peaks, and those to whom they are spoken should be big and tall of stature. The air thin and pure, danger near, and the spirit full of a joyful wickedness. These things suit one another. I want hobgoblins around me, for I am courageous. Courage that scares away phantoms makes hobgoblins for itself. Courage wants to laugh. I no longer feel as you do. This cloud which I see under me, this blackness and heaviness at which I laugh, precisely this is your thundercloud. You look up when you desire to be exalted, and I look down because I am exalted. Who among you can at the same time laugh and be exalted? He who climbs upon the highest mountains laughs at all tragedies, real or imaginary. If we can say one thing about Nietzsche, it is that he writes in blood, with passion and high spirit. However, Nietzsche is maybe one of the most misinterpreted and misunderstood philosophers of all. Some even dare say that he is a nihilist. But I would say that only the profoundly misguided fake philosophers would draw such a misinformed conclusion. Or, as Nietzsche likes to say, only the swamp-dwelling creatures. So, what is the philosophy of Nietzsche about? What is it that he has written in his blood? Well, in this short introduction, we shall see that Nietzsche is two things: a creator and a destroyer. A creator of a philosophy of hope, high spirit, truth, of going beyond, of climbing the highest mountain of loving life. But, as in every hero myth, before rising from the darkness, one must first fall. One must first destroy the old values and kill the blind king. For every climb starts at a low point. And the way that Nietzsche destroys the old values is by being a psychologist rather than a philosopher. For he does not only busy himself with the questions of philosophy like metaphysics, nihilism, morality, religion, and so on, but rather with questioning the questions of philosophy and their philosophers themselves, and by asking the question, what kind of person would ask such a question? For example, when Schopenhauer, one of the most profound enemies of Nietzsche, asks the question, why is life suffering? Nietzsche does not just take the question at face value. He first asks the question himself, what kind of cynic and denier of life asks such a question? What worldview, what philosophy and values do you need to ask such a question in the first place? And it is by questioning these questions that he becomes a destroyer of the old philosophy and its values, a destroyer of the old tables. So now, friends, let us begin by destroying these old tables. What do you believe in? In this, that the weight of all things must be determined anew. This simple phrase states the whole starting point of Nietzsche's philosophy, of his Zarathustra's going down. For Nietzsche had read all philosophers before him, like Kant, Schopenhauer, Spinoza, Plato, and so on. He read most substantial religious texts, Christian, Protestant, and even Buddhist. He read all papers of all moralists at the time, and he could but draw only one conclusion. Everybody is wrong. But what do these philosophers and men of faith have in common? Well, to answer this question, we need to start at the old Greeks, a nation that embraced eating, drinking, singing, loving, fighting, and, not least of all, power. They embraced and celebrated power. The gods are something to look up to aspire to become a god. In life, one should look up. In short, a nation that embraced life itself. Oh, those Greeks, they knew how to live. What is required for that is to stop courageously at the surface, the fold, the skin, to adore appearance, to believe in forms, tones, words, in the whole Olympus of appearance. Those Greeks were superficial out of profundity. But wherever there is power, there are people whose weakness is amplified in the face of this power. These are the dispossessed, the misfortunate, the main character in every popular tragedy, by their own fault or even by the sheer unfairness of life. They are the Cains in the story of Cain and Abel. And these people, these swamp-dwelling creatures, they become resentful. For why do they have power and not me? They say to themselves, the earth has a skin, and the skin has diseases. And one of these diseases, for example, is called man. So, they think to themselves, what can we do to gain power? We are not as strong as them, we are not as smart as them or as good looking, so what does a weak person do to feel strong? Well, simply, you make everything that is stronger into sin, and you make weakness into virtue. In other words, you go against all that is natural and aiming up. You create morality, you create law tables and punishment, you create good and evil. This decadence is maybe most pronounced in the Christian religion, the religion of pity, resentment, and love of the weak. One should not embellish or dress up Christianity. It has waged a war to the death against this higher type of man. It has excommunicated all the fundamental instincts of this type. It has distilled evil, the evil one, out of these instincts. The strong human being as the type of reprehensibility, as the outcast. Christianity has taken the side of everything weak, base, ill-constituted. It has made an ideal out of opposition to the preservative instincts of strong life. It has depraved the reason even of the intellectual strongest natures by teaching man to feel the supreme values of intellectuality as sinful, as misleading, as temptation. So what does Nietzsche mean when he says that the fundamental instincts of humans are made into the evil one? Well, let us note that for humans of the past, there was a great reliance on the senses, a great living in the moment and the striving to go up. There is no good and evil in nature. There is no guilt among animals. A bunny is not good just because it is harmless. It is just weak. But weakness is not goodness. Furthermore, good and evil belong to the gods and not to humans. You didn't need an afterlife. Life on this earth is more than enough. The opposite is true for the priestly kind. They made all instincts for what is higher into sin. They invented the concepts of good and evil so as to claim power over others. They preach of truth and thou shalt not kill nor judge, but one must not let oneself be misled. They say, judge not, but they send to hell everything that stands in their way. By allowing God to judge, they themselves judge. By glorifying God, they glorify themselves. By demanding precisely those virtues of which they themselves are capable. More, which they are in need of to stay on top at all. They present a great appearance of contending for virtue, of struggling for the triumph of virtue. We live, we die, we sacrifice ourselves for the good, truth, the light, the kingdom of God. In reality, they do what they cannot help doing, by making their way in a sneaking fashion, sitting in corners, living out shadowy lives in the shadows. They make a duty of it. Their life of humility appears to be a duty. As humility, it is one more proof of piety. And this humble, chaste, compassionate mode of mendaciousness, for us, virtue itself shall bear witness. These priests cannot have any power in this world, so they created a new one, a world after this one, a world where they rule, where their God rules, albeit a rule with force and suffering, and it's their weakness that they call good. Not only do they disgust life in this world, a world where beauty, self-affirmation and power are deemed as bad, as sin, they hated it so much that they created a new one, an imaginary one, to be able to reject all that represents the ascending movement of life, constituents, power, beauty, self-affirmation on earth, the instincts of resentment here become genius, had to invent another world from which that life affirmation would appear evil, reprehensible as such. For the priestly kind, decadence is only a means. This kind of man has a life interest in making mankind sick, and in inventing the concepts of good and evil, true and false, in a mortally dangerous and world-calumniating sense. Maybe the best affirmation of our hypothesis, namely that the priestly kind is only a wolf in sheep's clothing, a wolf seeking power at the expense of the sheep, is the discrepancies between the preaching, their gospel of love and kindness, and their actual deeds. We only have to look at the history of Christianity to see that love, harmlessness, and piety are the exact opposite of their true intentions. With their witch hunts, burning at the stake, selling of tickets into heaven, killing thousands by the sword in the name of the Lord. Shall I continue? Well, let us calm down for a minute, for we need to escape the dark grasp of these otherworldly men before they drag us down into their holes. Let us now turn our heads instead to our predecessor philosophers, for they must be really different from these priests. They properly answer the questions of morality in an honest way, right? They do celebrate this life over an illusion. To live means to be a long time sick. Well, these are the dying words of Socrates, the wisest of our celebrated philosophers in history. The example of a philosopher in every textbook, the man that claimed to have reached the truth. So this is the judgment of the wisest man? That life is just an unfortunate happening? That we are sick? In every age, the wisest have passed the identical judgment on life. It is worthless. Everywhere and always their mouth have uttered the same sound. A sound full of doubt, full of melancholy, full of weariness with life, full of opposition to life. But luckily, these philosophers found a cure for our sickness, namely, reason. Reason, the most celebrated features in humankind. For Plato, the equation adds up to reason is virtue, is happiness, means merely one must imitate Socrates and counter the dark desires by producing a new daylight, the daylight of reason. One must be prudent, clear, bright at any cost. Every yielding to the instincts, to the unconscious, leads downwards. But do you see the trick that he just played? If you look really careful, you see the same trick as we had seen before with the priest. Again, there is a new way to alienate more from ourselves. We created a new fictional world of reason, a world where we are in power. We, conscious beings, are in control of the unconscious. We use reason. We are reasonable. We make the judgments. We are in power of making the judgments. We are free in making our own decisions. But, as we have seen before, there is no such thing as free will. So where is our reason in a world without free will? Where is our power. Ha, there is free will, you say. Well, let us look at the history and see if it's rational then. Yes, the bloodbath that is our history we call reason. With its endless pointless wars, with the power-hungry rebels killing children, blowing themselves up in the name of faith, we created gulags, death camps, nuclear weapons capable of destroying each and every one of us, all very reasonable. In short, one may say anything about the history of the world, anything that might enter the most disordered imagination. The only thing one can't say is that it's rational. The very word sticks in one's throat. Thanks to this insight, we can sweep Kant's reasoning on morality from the table in one sweep. His categorical imperative. Act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. It is a remnant from the Christian, do unto others what you would have them do to you. So is that really what morality is? That good is to act in a way that benefits most? Or that does least harm? Or, even literally, that you want done to yourself? If that is the distinction between good and bad, then the first good person has yet to be born, because thus far, what first comes to mind is that, in this theory, the origin of the concept good was mistakenly identified, and thus thought in vain. For the judgment of good did not originate among those to whom goodness was shown. Rather, it has been the good men themselves, that is, the noble, the powerful, those of high degree, the high-minded, who have felt that they themselves are good, and that their actions were good. That is to say, of the first order, as opposed to all the low-minded, the vulgar and plebeian. The pathos of nobility and distance, as I have said, the continuing and dominating collective instinct, the feeling of superiority of a higher race, a master race in comparison to a subservient race. This is the origin of the opposition between good and bad. In reality, the elite wage a war in the name of reason, morality, God, the good, but not because they themselves are good, or their goodness, but to stay in power. There is only a select elite who rule, who have the power, and the rest perishes in their name. They use morality and virtue to stay in power, whatever the cost. That is what they call good. For by reasoning of do not do unto others what you don't want to be done to you, we should burn priests, kill politicians, starve the rich, and exile all kings and queens. So now we can see the patterns. We can see the resemblance between the old philosophers like Socrates, Kant, Schopenhauer, and the priests. They all deny life. They are hostile to life. These idols are trapped in the same life-denying thoughts. But luckily, a new age with new rational people emerged. Our modern enlightened age. A people of scientists. A blank, cold, fact-based and truth-seeking people. We live in the reality where God is dead and where we have killed him. We have replaced God with science. But why do we celebrate this? Is this really what we want? An aimless landscape of just facts? A postmodern world where every fact is just as valuable as every other? Where everything is equal? Yes, we have everything we could wish for. We only have to busy ourselves with eating cakes and the continuation of the species. But is this not exactly the cause of nihilism? Alas, I have known noble men who lost their highest hopes. And henceforth, they slander all high hopes. Henceforth they live impudently in brief pleasures, and they had hardly an aim beyond the day. Spirit is also sensual pleasure, thus they spoke. Then the wings of their spirit broke. Now it creeps around and it makes dirty what it feeds on. Once they thought of becoming heroes, now they are sensualists. The hero is to them an affliction and a terror. So yes, we have killed God and replaced it with science. We can answer all the scientific questions, create all the products we want and eat all the cakes we desire. But how is this different from our philosophers and our priests? We still escape from life into a fictional world of desire and consumption, like we had seen with Lacan and Zizek. Do you want to be happy? Just buy this, or just this, or this. And is equality really what we want? What do we climb when we flattened all mountains? And what do we mean today with equality? Is it not just the same tool of the weak to gain power like the priests before? Again, we ask the question, what kind of person would want equality? Why would you not want a difference, a gradient, a mountain to climb? The answer, well, because the weak and limping cannot climb. They cannot be strong, so they want to rid the world of the strongness itself. It is not allowed to aim up, to be more, to have more, to be stronger. Equality still means you should be as weak as me. We shall practice revenge and outcry against all who are not as we are. Thus the tarantula hearts promise themselves, and will to equality, that itself shall henceforth be the name of virtue, and we shall raise outcry against everything that has power. Now, the keen eye will have noticed one thing in particular, namely, that all is about power. They all use morality to gain power, for the priest creating good and evil by using God, for the philosopher by using reason, and the people today by using equality. But there is no such thing in nature as good and evil. There is only the weak and the strong, and the weak will do anything in their might to gain power, again and again, even if that means that they have to deny life itself and create a new world. But it is precisely in this destruction, in this lawless landscape, in this darkness and swamp, in this will to equality and weakness, that Nietzsche offers us a cure for our disease. And when I beheld my devil, I found him serious, thorough, profound, solemn. It was the spirit of gravity. Through him all things are ruined. One does not kill by anger, but by laughter. Come, let us kill the spirit of gravity. So now we see the whole monster that we are going to fight in Nietzsche's philosophy. The denial of life, this melancholy, this nihilism, this spirit of gravity. And even though most of Nietzsche's books are on defining the disease, there is one in which he presents us with the cure, his magnum opus, his Zarathustra. Now, let it be clear that Zarathustra has observed man for a long time. He observed the people from high up in the mountain. And what is this? He draws the same conclusion as the priests and philosophers, namely, that life is suffering. But here the most important distinction comes to light. Yes, life is suffering. We will endure misery, everything around us dies, we will be depressed more than once in our lives for whatever reason. Hats off to all the philosophers, scientists and priests for this discovery. However, the solution is not to then just throw the towel into the ring, to deny life. The Schopenhauerian way to live life in abstinence like the priest locked away in a high tower, afraid of his own desires. No, the solution is to embrace life, to confront the dragon straight on. We need to become higher men. We need to overcome ourselves. And where the most cautious people ask today, how can man still be preserved? Zarathustra, however, asked as the sole and first one to do so, how shall man be overcome? And to the intoxicated, blind and distracted consumers of today, we thus say, overcome, you higher men, the petty virtues, the petty prudences, the scent grain discretion, the ant swarm inanity, miserable ease, the happiness of the greatest number, and rather despair than submit. And truly, I love you because you do not know how to live today, you higher men, for thus do you live best. Do not become distracted and weakened by ease and comfort, but confront fear. I do not call cold-spirited, mulish, blind or intoxicated man stout-hearted. He possesses heart who knows fear but masters fear, who sees the abyss but sees it with pride. And to those who want equality we say, let us be unequal, let us go up, let us be different. I do not want to be confused with these preachers of equality, nor taken for one of them. For justice speaks thus to me, men are not equal, and they should not become so either. For what were my love of the Übermensch if I spoke otherwise? And now that the old god has retired from service, we do not want to escape to a fake world anymore. So we say to the priests, but we certainly do not want to enter into the kingdom of heaven. We have become man, so we want the kingdom on earth. And let us not be afraid of this life and all its suffering. Let us say to death, was that life? Very well, once more. Let life recur eternally. Let us climb on our own shoulders and overcome ourselves. And this is the great noontide. It is when man stands at the middle of his course between animal and Übermensch and celebrates his journey to the evening as its highest hope. For it is the journey to a new morning. Then man going under will bless himself, for he will be going over to Übermensch. And the sun of his knowledge will stand at noontide. All gods are dead, now we want the Übermensch to live. Let this be our last will one day at the great noontide. Before leaving you, I will present you with a reading list on screen. This is no ultimate guide, just my opinion on how Nietzsche can be experienced best. This is why I would start by reading his Zarathustra, like I did. You will not understand everything, and you will curse his writing, like I did. But when you then read all of his other books, as presented on screen, and return to his Zarathustra, you will say, alas, my friends, let us go up, let us climb this mountain. I hope this video helps you in that climb. For now, thank you for watching this video. I hope something good happens to you today, my fellow higher men, and to see you in the next video.